Thank you, Meryl. Good evening, everyone. We're really thrilled to have you here. First, a brief disclaimer. As a nonprofit, we are not allowed to take positions on political views. As individuals, we surely are. We find somebody who can represent the red side of things. We would be happy to entertain their coming and presenting. Tonight, our speaker is R.L. Miller, who founded Climate Hawks Vote to build grassroots political power for the climate movement. I can speak from personal experience. She sends several times a week opportunities to take a point of view on various climate issues, and I seem to be signing up for them all the time. So thank you for your leadership, RL. She is a Woolsey Fire survivor, has been elected to the Democratic National Committee and is active on that right now. And I hope we get to see a lot about that tonight or hear a lot about that tonight. She was elected chair previously, emeritus of the California Democratic Party's Environmental Caucus for 8 years from 2013 to 2021. Her past work has included exposing the politics of climate denial, don't we need that, opposing fracking in California, another wonderful move. I'm editorializing, I guess, and training others to advocate for legislation. RL has earned high honors in political science at UCSD for writing a thesis on coal exports and a law degree from UC Davis. And she likes to say her outside interests include keeping chickens and sleeping. So hopefully you won't sleep for the next hour or so, RL. We'd love to hear from you. Please, over to you.
Thanks so much for inviting me. And let me say right off that as a UCSD grad back in the 1980s, way too long ago, I have a special spot in my heart for North San Diego County. Best beaches, best climate, best everything in the known universe, except for strawberries. I've moved up to Ventura County and we grow the best strawberries. So I guess I'll do a little bit in the way of a bio. I have a law degree. I stopped practicing law and devoted my life's work full time to climate change about 10, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, because honestly, it was a calling. It's not something that once you learn about just how bad climate change can be, it's not something you can ignore. Before that, I was a mom. I practiced law, but I also raised my sons as a single mother. And I drove them to the strawberry fields for field trips. And when they needed Clifford, I dressed up as a big furry red dog for the library sale. And when my son got into hockey, I schlepped his gear to the rink. And when he got into jazz band, I ran the bake sales at the high school concerts. And along comes this woman by the name of Sarah Palin, getting up on the national stage, talking about how, she's going to do all these things as vice president. And I looked at her, and she and I were the exact same age. And I looked at her and I thought, we have so many things in common. We are both community organizer types. We are both parents who really care about our children. We are both hockey moms, and we are both absolutely unqualified to be vice president of the United States. So in the same way that Donald Trump brought a lot of women, mostly women, off the sidelines in 2016, Sarah Palin brought me off the sidelines in 2008. And when I was a little girl, I wanted to save the rainforest without really knowing where it was, or save the tigers because they were like cool looking animals, right? Without really understanding biodiversity. And I rediscovered that. And the more I found out about climate change, the more alarmed I got. Like I say, I have children. Then along came the Woolsey Fire, and I evacuated my 94-year-old mother, and I watched my son's childhood memories burn down on national television. I watched flames within 500 feet of my home. And, at this point, this climate change stuff is personal to me. But it's not personal to just me. I mean, if you have a lawn that hasn't been watered since June or is dying because it's only getting 1 day of water per week, if you've been burned out of your home or even threatened by the wildfires that have affected every corner of California, or if you know somebody who has, you too are personally impacted by climate change, like it or not. So yeah, this stuff is personal, but it's personal to all of us in California by now. And one message that I've tried to bring wherever I speak nationally to, for example, the DNC, and I'll get into the DNC in a little bit. I try to emphasize to people who think that climate is something that we need to deal with by 2050. I try to tell them that climate change is right here, right now. And I have a husky in the background and she agrees with me. So please forgive me if she acts up a little bit. So I'm going to try to talk about, in no particular order, I'm going to leapfrog a little bit around what's on the ballot in November. What's generally happening at the State House, even though they're not doing stuff. The legislative session has ended, they're still doing stuff. And that includes the PUC, by the way, and the solar fight. And I'll try to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. And I'll try to talk about the DNC and climate politics, because the single most important thing that you could do to make a difference is show up and vote. I know it's weird. It's like this one weird trick, but it turns out that every single good thing that happens in the way of public policy happens because we elect good people who promise to do something about it, and then we yell at them to make sure that they do in fact do something about it. And it starts by voting, it starts by showing up in November. And just a quick, do a little reaction however you wish. Raise your physical hand, raise your virtual hand. Everybody here registered to vote? Everybody here knows generally that there's an election coming up? Yeah, okay, glad to see that. If you're not, it's easy to go register at register.sos.ca.gov. I think I'll double check that. I'm really good at many things, multitasking, but I cannot talk and type at the same time. I will wait to drop links into chats when I have a chance. One of the main things that happened, because we elected good people who care about climate change and mostly yelled at them for a solid year, was the Inflation Reduction Act, formerly known as Build Back Better. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to try to convey to you all of the awesome benefits that are in the Inflation Reduction Act. And I'm going to be mostly dropping links into chats. You guys probably watched this bill get whittled down from 6 trillion in somebody's dreams to 3 trillion to 1.5 trillion. And it finally passed at, I don't know, 700 billion, of which 370 billion roughly goes to fight climate change. And the main way that it does that is through carrots, not sticks. You guys probably watched the way the bill was negotiated, with Joe Manchin as the guy who didn't want to hit the fossil fuel industry with sticks. He just wanted to give carrots to the clean energy industry. And that shaped a lot of what's in the bill. So there's no carbon tax, there's no punitive things at all, but there's a lot of money. There's a lot of investments, and some of those investments are going to play out in over a long range in the way of investments in the United States, in the way of factories, mostly in other states, not in California. Some of it is going to play out, by the way, in the Imperial Valley in the Salton Sea, which is now being renamed Lithium Valley because everybody's really excited about lithium there. But a lot of this stuff is just going to be straight to consumers. You want to put solar, again, show of hands here, who here already has solar on the rooftops? And San Diego is the hottest spot in the country for solar rooftops. We are the largest, it is the largest market. And another show of hands, who here wants to put solar on their rooftops? Yeah, I see more hands going up. There are two other categories here, who here would like to put solar on the rooftop, but they can't because they live in a mobile home or they live in an apartment with no possibility of buying a home or anything like that. And then the last category is people who don't want solar, people who think solar is ugly, it's not needed. I don't know, I've never run into somebody who says that. I understand they're out there, but I've never run into them. And I'll come back to that, by the way, because have you guys had a speaker about the mess, the rooftop solar mess at the PUC?
No, go ahead, please explain.
Oh boy, oh boy. I'm gonna come back to that one. It's gonna take me a little bit of time because that one is really important. But let me first talk about the inflation benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act. You guys might remember that there was a tax credit of 30%. You put in a $10,000 tax system, you get $3,000 in the way of tax credits. And then it was being phased down, and it was going to 28%, and then it was going to 26% and 24%. Well, it's back up to 20 to 30%. That's not the only thing. There's going to be a lot of money for cars. And I'll tell you, I get asked more about cars than I do about solar systems, because during the time that you own one house, you're probably going to be going through, I don't know, 4 or 5 different cars. And the cars stuff gets confusing, but what you need to know mostly is that there's going to be up to $7,500 tax credit for cars that are mostly made in America. Why mostly made in America? Remember I said that there's a bunch of money coming into the United States in the way of factories. That's the benefit that we're not going to see so much in California, but it's bringing jobs to Georgia, to Kansas, to Ohio, to all sorts of places in the United States that need these jobs. And it's all because of the Inflation Reduction Act mandating that a decent amount of the car has to be made in the United States for it to qualify for the tax credit. In addition, there's going to be a $4,000 tax credit if you buy a used car. Now, the rules on all this are really complicated. Some of this stuff kicks in right away. Most of it does not kick in until January. So if you haven't already signed up to go solar or to buy an EV, I'd advise you to wait, talk to your tax people. They're still figuring out this stuff at the IRS. I looked at one website that was released the day after Joe Biden signed the bill, and they'd obviously put it together, at midnight, and it had typos all over the place. And this was an official Department of Treasury publication. It's been cleaned up a little bit, but the first place to start is cleanenergy.gov. And that one has a cute little picture of a house that shows you all the different things that you could do to your house. It's not just cars and solar rooftops. It's also upgrading your electric panel if needed. And it's also heat pumps. People here are familiar with heat pumps? I mean, like really familiar with them, or just sort of like, you know, that they're a cool thing that people have been talking about in the last 6 months? Because I'll tell you right away, I'm in the second category. I didn't know heat pumps were really a thing until about 6 months ago when my friends, well, maybe about 8 months ago when Putin invaded Ukraine and my friend Bill McKibben started talking about heat pumps for peace. And I've had to since get up to speed a little bit on heat pumps. I cannot begin to tell you how they actually work because it's complicated. All I know is that they replace both your heating and your air conditioning. This is important, especially if you live inland in California. Even though it's called a heat pump, it replaces your air conditioning. And there's something like an $8,000 rebate. And honestly, this one looks pretty amazing because if pricing these heat pumps, I've not been able to get a decent price in my area because the installers are not yet familiar with them, but they seem to be in the $8,000 to $12,000 range. So this could end up being an almost free thing for you, depending on what your needs are. Again, cleanenergy.gov will get you started on all the good things. And I'm going to be dropping some links into the chat when I'm trying to answer some questions, some additional reading. The place where I get a lot of questions, by the way, is cars. Hi, Kat. I get more questions about cars. And again, I'm just going to repeat to you guys that it is complicated. If you've signed a contract for a Tesla that hasn't yet, if you signed a contract this year and you're not going to get delivery of the car until next year, the rules are even more confusing. So again, please check them out. But the point is that this is $370 billion, which is more money than ever has been invested in climate. And no, it's not enough. And no, it's a fraction compared to our military's budget. I saw a comment in the chat about that. And yes, there's more that we can do. As I said that before, that bill was cut down from $6 trillion in somebody's eyes down to $370 billion. And to get it to that point, they had to cut down a lot. They had to cut out the child tax credit. And the child tax credit was honestly an awesome thing that got half the children in poverty in America out of poverty. And then it just expired. And they want to come back to it. They should come back to it. It's one of those policies that has nothing to do with climate. I'm rambling a little bit, but it's immensely beneficial if you care about children in our society. So, of course, this only happens if the Democrats enlarge their majority in the Senate and hold the House. Is that going to happen? So at this point, I'm going to segue a little bit over from Inflation Reduction Act. I'm going to come back to this a little bit when I talk about Manchin's dirty deal. No, I'm going to talk about Manchin's dirty deal right now. So if you guys were paying attention to the politics, you knew that there was a tremendous outcry in late August, early September, mid-September, late September, around something that we all named Manchin's dirty deal. The idea was that Schumer and Manchin signed a deal, that the Inflation Reduction Act, that only needed 50 senators because it's a budget reconciliation bill. And under the rules of the Senate, budget reconciliation can pass with only 50 senators if it has to do with spending money. And this bill is all about spending money. Separately, Manchin wanted a deal that he gave some name to it, but we all just called it Manchin's side deal when we weren't calling it worse names, that had nothing to do with budget. And so it had to get 60 votes in the Senate. And the plan that he and Schumer cooked up originally was to attach this to a must-pass bill and jam it through the Senate quickly while nobody was noticing. Problem with that was that we all noticed and we all started screaming. What's a must-pass bill? There's two must-pass bills. Number one is the continuing resolution, which is a bill that funds the government till roughly mid-December, that had to pass by September 30th, or the government would shut down and run out of money like it's done a few other times before. And the other one is called the National Defense Authorization Act, also known as the bill funding our military. So Manchin and Schumer first tried to attach it to the continuing resolution, AKA the CR. And we all freaked because there were parts of the bill that were the American Petroleum Institute's wet dream. And I'm not making that up. American Petroleum Institute saw a draft of that bill. It was shopped around to them for their approval. It was because we saw a copy of the bill with their watermark on it. It was not shopped over to the Solar Energy Industry Association, nor was it shopped over to the American Wind Energy Association. And it was going to do all sorts of things in the way of permitting, to make it easier to permit to get transmission lines built, but also to get pipelines built. And here's a big shocker that I need to convey to you guys. I hope you're all sitting down for this one. Solar energy doesn't go through a pipeline. You shocked? Yeah. Wind energy doesn't go through a pipeline. So we had a bill that Republicans thought didn't go far enough because it wasn't nice enough to the pipeline industry and the stuff that is carried through pipelines, the petroleum, the natural gas, and what have you. And on the other hand, we had a bill that was going to screw over, sorry for the terminology, but greatly harm the frontline communities in the path of those transmission lines. Frontline communities in the path of transmission lines generally being poor people, Black people, brown people, and a lot of Native American people. So we all freaked out, and we all got together and screamed and shouted. And ultimately, Manchin decided that he did not have enough votes to include the dirty deal in the continuing resolution, pulled it out around September 24th, and then the continuing resolution passed by September 30th with no drama. In fact, you might not even have heard that the continuing resolution passed because nobody cared anymore. That's part one. Part two, since it's Halloween season, there's going to be a sequel. And the sequel is going to be a lot more scary. And the sequel is going to be that the dirty deal or something is going to get attached to the National Defense Authorization Act to fund the troops. What's going to be attached? This is where I don't know. I'm close to a couple of members of Congress who sometimes tell me stuff. One of them says that we really needed to pass that because what we need to do is speed up transmission lines, that electricity transmission lines that carry wind and solar energy and get it mostly from places like Iowa and Wyoming to places like New York and California. You know, the wide open spaces where you've got a lot of wind versus the cities that actually need the electricity. It's hard to get those transmission lines built. You run into a lot of flack everywhere. I'm hoping that there's going to be some sort of balance struck where we do bend over backwards for speeding up permitting of wind and solar carrying transmission lines, but the pipelines, not so much. The pipelines, we don't speed them up at all. I'm just telling you guys this because it's going to come up at some point in mid-December. We're going to start making noise about it once we have a little bit better idea what's going on. Right now, none of us on the outside do. Stuff is still being negotiated on the inside in Congress. Please do stay alert. Please do get involved. Do not be shy about calling your Congress member and asking him or her to squawk up and say no to the dirty deal. We circulated a letter that had 72 different Congress members on it, and that was a pretty strong showing that there were a lot of people in Congress really opposed to jamming this down people's throats at the last minute. Here's my part, by the way. So we had DNC meetings in early September, and I wrote a DNC resolution. I wrote a resolution calling on the DNC to oppose the dirty deal and instead pass the continuing resolution as a clean bill while putting the dirty deal up for a vote on its own on the side. You know, let's debate the merits of that bill on the side separately. Let's not just jam it down somebody else's throat. So unfortunately, the powers that be felt that my resolution might embarrass the president. And even though I made a big speech about it in front of the resolutions committee at the DNC, and lots of DNC members applauded and cheered me on, the resolutions committee killed it without even a vote. So I was sort of cranky about that, but hey, I gave it a try. It got written up in the Washington Post, and it was part of demonstrating widespread opposition to Manchin's dirty deal. So I'm on the DNC. I'm the first person from Ventura County ever elected. You guys have a couple of people from, or I think one person from San Diego County who's elected by the name of Will Rodriguez Kennedy. We get together and talk about things from time to time. The DNC is not to be confused with the DSCC or the DCCC or the DLCC or any of those other acronyms. And if you get them confused, really, it's all right. But my job mostly is to be an ambassador, if you will, from the national party to anybody and everybody. So if you want to yell at me and tell me that Joe Biden sucks, or if you want to yell at me and tell me that he's awesome and needs more support, I will listen and I will take it back as best I can. Okay, so like I say, I'm rambling a little bit, but I wanted to sort of focus, I wanted to jump around from the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act over to the dirty deal and the way that it's probably gonna come back so that you guys can be aware of it. But I want to talk now about what's going on in California, and what's happening at the PUC in particular. Oh boy. And by the way, I am not an ADEM. I started off as an ADEM. Somebody heard me speak somewhere and said, you should run for ADEM. And I said, I guess. I didn't really know what I was getting into. And I discovered that I was pretty good at it. And I was asked to be the secretary of the environmental caucus. And then the guy who brought me on left, and this other guy took over, and I felt that he wasn't being active enough. And so I challenged him for chair, and I ran against him, and I won. And I was the chair of the state Dem Party's environmental caucus for 8 years, which sounds really impressive, but you know, it was more of a fancy title than anything else. My main contribution while on the Cal Dem Party environmental caucus was I created something called the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge. And it looks like, you can see a couple of the boards behind me. First meeting where I brought this out, I brought in a board, a big whiteboard like this. And I said that if you want to speak, you candidate want to speak to these 300 very plugged in activists, then you need to sign a pledge that you won't take money from the oil industry. And they did. This is Gavin Newsom at the top, in fact. This is the board that he signed. And the board that is immediately, that you can see easiest, has been signed by Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, who would only sign it with me, Bernie Sanders, and Cory Booker. It's been signed by every presidential candidate, including Joe Biden in 2020. It is mainstream. And I tell you this because it's one of the ways of separating out the Democrats who say that they care about climate change, who are running for state legislature, versus the ones who are actually pretty committed to doing something about it. And by the way, I'm not sure who she's running against, but Catherine Blakespear. I know that she's been the mayor of one of the, I'm not sure it was Carlsbad or one of the coastal towns.
Encinitas.
I'm sorry?
Encinitas.
Encinitas, yeah, she's awesome. She's signed the pledge, and right now, today, I heard that the oil companies are putting in $5 million to defeat her and some of the other people running for 4 or 5 other people running for assembly. So if you have the opportunity to vote for Catherine, please do so. Okay. Sorry, I'm just sort of like skimming. There's a very long note here in the chat. Yeah, they want to put one of the reasons that solar got so big in the California desert is that it was a win-win for everybody, because most people who don't, other than environmentalists, think that the desert is trash. The land was, I'm sorry to say that, but you know, you and I know that the desert is awesome and it's beautiful. It just needs some time to be appreciated. But a lot of people just look at it and see emptiness. And then the land's owned by the federal government, and the feds under Obama and then under Biden want to put solar everywhere. And so you ended up with massive solar plants in the California desert, among other places. So let's talk about what's going on at the PUC. If you have ever considered going rooftop solar, you know that somebody probably knocks on your door, and or some salesperson sits down in your front room and he's got a spreadsheet on it's going to cost you X dollars up front, but you're going to have a payback period of 5 years or 8 years in my case, and then the solar is going to be free. Free-ish, I should say. I'm in Southern California Edison territory. I'm guessing that most of you guys are in San Diego gas and electric territory. But no matter what, the math is pretty well the same. And this is thanks to a policy called net energy metering, alphabet soup. So alphabet soup, net energy metering means very generally that I have solar on my rooftop, and I benefit because my solar, you know, I use my solar during the day, but during the day, my rooftop generates more solar than I can use, and it sends it back to the grid. SoCal Edison has to pay me a certain amount of money. I want to say 25 cents per kilowatt hour. I'm making this number up. For everything that I am sending back to the grid, for everything that I am sending back to the grid. And if I play my cards right, and I'm really lucky, I might even get like an extra check back from them for like $100 at the end of the year that I go and spend on Christmas presents for my family. What they want to do was drastically change net energy metering. And when I say they, I mean the PUC, egged on by the three corporate utilities, Pacific Gas and Electric in the north, Southern California Edison in the Los Angeles area, and San Diego Gas and Electric down where you guys are. So what they wanted to do was put a tax on the sun, if you will, charge a fee. Their argument is, so I am Susie Solar, and I've got this solar on my rooftop, and I'm being paid to send my solar back. But because they have to pay me so much money, my neighbor who doesn't have solar, Ned and Nancy non-solar, their bills are going up, and their bills are going up sky high, and it's all my fault. If you see a problem with this, by the way, hold on. And by the way, have I mentioned that Ned and Nancy are actually low-income Californians who live in apartment buildings who can't go solar, and they are the people that we should be trying to benefit by having their rates stay low instead of making them pay for rich people's solar. That goes the argument. There's only a few problems with this argument. If you think that the reason that Ned and Nancy's rates are going up is because of me, and it's not because of Pacific Gas and Electric's crime spree in which they murdered 85 Californians and blew up a pipeline that killed another 10 Californians and went into bankruptcy and hired bankruptcy lawyers and still haven't paid out pennies on the wildfire victims in Sonoma County, and all the lawyers that they've paid and all the bonuses they pay their chief executive officer, something like $50 million a year. If you think that the reason that their rates are going up is because of me and my rooftop solar, I got a bridge to sell you. Yeah. So like I say, this idea of rooftop solar at the PUC has been a big fight. So last December, the PUC put out a draft bill, a draft revision of net energy metering, which is called NEM 3.0 because it's their third go round on it. Apparently I'm in net energy metering 2.0. So the gist of this was that solar in California was going to become extremely expensive. How expensive? It was going to be more expensive than any place in America except for a couple of places in Wyoming and Alabama. More expensive than West Virginia. More expensive than Mississippi. And anytime California is being unfavorably compared to Mississippi and West Virginia, I have a problem. So it literally was going to become something for billionaire hobbyists, and it was never going to pay out. Remember I said those solar guys will sit down with you and tell you that after 5 years or 8 years, your system is going to pay for itself? It would never have paid for itself, not after 20 years. And this was supposed to go through fairly quickly because it was supposed to be that nobody pays any attention to the PUC, and the PUC's proceedings are so opaque and hard to follow, and all those acronyms, and it makes your head spin just to follow it all. Well, yeah, that didn't work. We got all riled up and everybody spoke out. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody from Arnold Schwarzenegger to Dianne Feinstein. Mike Levin led a letter of members of Congress. He's been awesome on this, by the way. Lots and lots and lots of people spoke out. We delivered 120,000 signatures on a petition. We did rallies in Los Angeles and San Francisco twice. And we did rallies in Sacramento a year ago, and then another one last week. Or last week? My God, it's 2 days ago. And there's a group called Solar Rights Alliance that is leading the charge on this. They do work closely with the San Diego, with the Cal Solar Storage Alliance, and they're doing great work. So please do sign up for their emails. I'm seeing somebody drop a note in the chat. Yes, it's Solar Rights Alliance. And Newsom knows that he has a political problem on his hands. How bad is that political problem? The Florida utilities tried to do something very similar in Florida, and it needed approval from the Florida legislature, and it got jammed through in Florida because the legislature is run by Republicans over there, and and everybody expected that Ron DeSantis was going to sign the bill, and he instead vetoed the bill. So Gavin Newsom needs to be at least as good as Ron DeSantis on this, right? So yes, he has a political problem on his hands. He knows that he knows that it needs some work. This decision was supposed to come out in January, and then February, and then May, and then they said September 29th. We're still waiting. We're still waiting because, honestly, we've built up enough political pressure that I think this isn't going to get decided until after Newsom gets reelected. And it's still going to be a mess no matter what happens. I don't see any way that they're going to get out of this without somebody screaming at them. And frankly, I'd rather that it's the utilities scream at them than us screaming at them. Because if the utilities scream at them, it means we won. I just can't emphasize enough what an important fight this is. And just to bring it back to big solar plants out in the desert, just to state the obvious, the more that we are running California on rooftop solar, the less we need big plants out in the desert and big utility transmission lines running from Wyoming into California. So if you haven't already gone solar, this is going to be a great time to do it. You might want to wait until after January to be sure that those Inflation Reduction benefits kick in. But if you haven't already gone solar, please do so. I am now paying $12 a month or thereabouts on my electric bill. And honestly, I believe in this so much that I took money out of my retirement account to pay for this. This wasn't like I had $20,000 lying around my house. So I did that. I now am living what I call the American Dream version 2.0, which is to say I have a solar panel on every roof. I have an electric vehicle charging in every garage, and I have a chicken in every backyard. So I'm fortunate enough to live out in the country a little bit where I can have chickens, and they lay me fresh eggs, and I have a little backyard mini farm going, and it's all very nice and sustainable. I didn't think I was going to be talking this long. You guys still awake? I hope you're still awake. So I mentioned that the state legislature is still up to things, even though it's not up to things. it's out of session. We passed a lot of bills. We honestly passed some good bills there at the very end because Gavin Newsom did get involved. And our big victory was, I'm gonna hit on Prop 30. Okay, I am gonna hit on Prop 30, I promise. Our big victory though was on something called SB 1137, which was a setback bill. Simply that oil wells have to be located not too terribly close to your home, because if you have an oil well next to your home or next to your school, it makes you sick. It seems like sort of like common sense, right? And we got that bill passed when Gavin Newsom got off the sidelines, and it's a good bill. And 3 days after Newsom signed it, the oil companies announced that they want to put a referendum on it on the ballot. If a referendum is, if they get enough signatures on the referendum, then the law is stayed for 2 years while we wait for the referendum vote. This is what Juul, the vaping company, has done with Proposition 31. 2 years ago, the legislature passed a bill to cut down on, I think it was teenage vaping, flavored tobacco, that's what it was. And Juul freaked, it's spelled J-U-U-L, freaked out and got enough signatures to put a referendum on the ballot, so that we are now voting on Prop 31. Vote yes on Prop 31 if you don't want these flavored tobacco products sold to teenagers. Same thing is happening now with 2 different bills that the legislature passed this year. First one has to do with the fast food industry, and it's a bill called AB 257 that would have set up like a really basic proto-union kind of council. It's like the first step of a baby union. It's not even a real union like Starbucks is doing. And the fast food industry just freaked. And so the fast food industry is right now going around telling everybody to sign this to protect small restaurants, McDonald's. And if you don't sign this, then you're going to be paying $22 for your hamburgers. Don't eat beef. And at the same time, the oil industry is going around lying to people, telling you that if you don't sign on to their referendum, then, their referendum is really for clean energy, and it's really for the benefit of consumers, because it's really good for people to live next to an oil well. Well, anyways, don't sign any petitions unless you absolutely understand who's putting them on the ballot and what the proposition is. At this point, I'm getting really distrustful of the initiative process. It's referendum process. It's being used to attack good people, and it's being used to attack good laws by people who are lying through their teeth. And so I'm just telling you guys, I'm just giving you a warning. If in the next 3 months you see these petitions, you see people standing out in front of Ralph's with a clipboard, don't sign unless you're absolutely sure. And even then, don't do it. Okay, so that was my rant. That was all on Prop 31. Prop 30, I'm going to vote for it. I have sort of mixed feelings about it because I don't like the way that it's Lyft is funding so much of it, and when Lyft funds so much of it, I'm a little distrustful. The inside, yeah, ask me about the inside story, but the general idea is that Gavin Newsom wants this. Yeah, this is the inside story. Prop 30 will tax billionaires to raise a lot of money to do a lot of good things in the way of getting us out of ICE cars, internal combustion engine or gasoline powered cars, and into EVs. And it's going to raise money the money that it raises from the billionaires is going to go into 3 buckets. Number 1 is for wildfire prevention, which we all need. Number 2 is going to be for EV charging, which the feds are already committing to some, but honestly, we're going to need a lot of EV chargers. And the third part is going to be in some fashion for reducing, for more rebates, I believe, for electric vehicles. And on the one hand, I'm offended that Lyft is putting so much money into this and that Lyft is doing this to evade, to get around CARB regulations that are going to make it, are going to require Lyft to have 90% of its electric vehicle, 90% of its rides have to be done by electric vehicles by 2030. On the other hand, I've never met a billionaire who didn't deserve to be taxed. And I've never, and I'm gonna end up voting for this. The Newsom wants to be known as a climate governor. And the inside story is that he wants to be known as the governor who got this done without raising taxes. And Prop 30 raises taxes. And so that's why, that's the inside story, the scuttlebutt around the Capitol as to why he's come out against this. But overall, I think it's a good bill, even if it helps Lyft a lot, it helps all of us a lot. And so I'm going to end up voting for it. I can answer questions that you guys may have about other propositions at some point if you want, but all the other propositions are pretty off topic on the subject of climate change. I'm just going to sort of, wrap things up a little bit by saying, please show up and vote. We win policy by getting in good people to enact that policy. And everybody from Joe Biden to Mike Levin to Catherine Blakespear are all good people. And locally, you can ask your local candidates, your water board candidates and such like that, ask them to sign the no fossil fuel money pledge. And that's a pretty good way of separating out the people who are sincere about wanting to do something about climate change versus the people who just sort of think that it's a box that they have to check. Because you guys and we all know that climate change is not just a box to check. It's an existential threat. And we all need to do something about it. So thank you so much for having me. I'm going to try to take a breath. I'm going to drop into the chat a petition that we're actually going to be asking people to sign tomorrow. And if you sign that, you'll end up on my email list, and try generally to include some links to back up all the stuff that I've been talking about over the last 20 minutes. And I'm going to mostly just try to catch a breath.
Fantastic. Well, RL, thank you so much. That was a big gulp of water, I guess, is maybe the way to say it. Meryl and Marion, would you please monitor any questions in the chat, and maybe we can alternate questions. I'd like to start, RL, with a few questions for you. And the first one is, what's the process to become a member of the RNC? What are the RNC's climate policies? Did you write them? Who's writing them? And how do we influence the policies? And do the policies really mean anything at the end of the day in terms of legislation or actions by members of Congress, et cetera?
So RNC, DNC.
DNC, sorry.
Right, how to get on the RNC, I have no idea.
Okay, DNC, pardon me.
Right. Yeah, DNC, I was elected by the California Democratic Party's e-board members. It's basically a fairly elitist electorate. You won't see my name on your ballot. If you're on the California Democratic Party's executive board, you'll be voting for me I hope in 2 years at some point in June or thereabouts in 2024. It's not easy to do because basically you have to be well known across the state. And by the time I ran, everybody knew who I was because I'd been the environmental caucus chair for 8 years. And I was the lady who was always holding up the no fossil fuel money pledge at the convention. And I went around and I talked to people, and that's why, you may see me at some San Diego Democratic Party dinner. By the way, San Diego has a club called the San Diego Environmental Dems, and they are the best club ever. I wish that we could clone them and put them into every county, but they are, as far as I know, the only Democratic club in the state that is really explicitly devoted to environmental protection. And so they're a really good group of people, and I highly recommend them if you're wanting to get involved in Dem party politics at all. And believe me, I get it if you don't. I know that we spend way too much time arguing over resolutions. At the DNC, I mostly do some, we try to write resolutions. They only like to pass resolutions that are fairly non-controversial. My resolution that I tried to put forth was too controversial. And I got to stand in a rope line and finally meet Joe Biden, which was nice. But for the most part, it's state party folk networking with each other, finding out what works well in California. Can we export that over to Wyoming? Yes, please do so. And talking with each other and checking things out. I am part of a group that is trying to modernize the DNC. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, though, because generally we're trying to make the DNC a little bit more grassrootsy and a little bit more responsive. Right now, you can get on the DNC basically by being famous.
Okay, so what is the environmental platform, and how does it get influenced, and what influence does it have?
And I was on the outside writing amendments to it. We wrote it in 2020, and this was the platform that Biden ran on. And this is the platform that all Democrats, in theory, are running on. And platforms might seem like they're just a bunch of words, but I'll tell you, over the years, platforms have a way of sorting people out and clarifying a party's values. Platforms do state party values. I have written the California Democratic Party's environmental energy and environment plank for like the last 4 years are all explicitly mine. I rewrote it top to bottom. And they are statements of party values. If you've been around Dem party politics for a long time, you might remember that there were pro-life Democrats. These were Catholic Democrats. These were Democrats who said, we must restrict abortion. We cannot allow abortions. Those people, after years of banging on them through things like platforms, they've turned into either Republicans or I personally would not get an abortion or let my daughter have an abortion, but I accept that this is a part of the party platform and it is part of our values. And that's to me the biggest example. And so right now our platform calls for net zero by 2050. I'm going to be in there in 2024. I make this promise to you. I'm going to be in there yelling at them to do a lot more. What frustrates me about politicians a lot is Democrats who talk about anything by 2030, by 2050. I don't know where I'm going to be in 2050. I can tell you that Joe Biden will be dead. I'm sorry to be blunt about this, but he's likely not going to live to be 110 or whatever the heck that's going to be.
Okay, so let me bang on you again.
Yeah.
Is net zero by 2050 the entire environmental platform of the DNC? Where do we find it? Where is it? Where's it written? Where do we get copy? How do we influence it?
I will find the link for you. It is on the party website, or it should be on the party website. We wrote it in 2020, and it was a collaborative process, and it was about 4 pages worth. And there were little bits that I know that I got in. I was able to make some amendments, but it wasn't as strong as I wanted it to be. And some of my amendments regarding, I think Biden wanted to double wind and triple solar, and I wanted to change things to quintupling wind and solar, and they wouldn't do that. They thought they didn't appreciate my math. But yeah, it is a big thing that we present to the party that gets ratified at the convention every time the president is up for election. So July or thereabouts of 2020, and it's going to be redone in July or thereabouts of 2024.
Okay, thank you. Marion, do you have a question from our audience?
I haven't seen too many yet in chat, so guys, don't be shy.
Oh, well, let me jump in then. I have some more. Do you want to go?
Too.
Go.
Sure. I just couple of things here. Okay, I am responsible, as many of our other board members are, for trying to promote our talks and engage people to talk about the climate crisis. And a lot of us do wear 2 hats. You know, we'll belong to the local Democratic clubs. And I personally am very frustrated by what I see as a kind of a lack of concern by a lot of the Democrats that I run into. And it's very frustrating. It's like they're really on all these other topics. So do you have any suggestions of how we can engage Democrats and bring them in? I mean, it is part of the platform, but it seems like it never gets the attention. Climate change. It's like the forgotten child up in the attic. So.
Thank you for that, Marion. And this is my ongoing extreme frustration with the Democratic Party. And I can tell you from experience, part of this is sort of the sense that everything is in crisis. A typical Democratic politician has people yelling at them to do something about healthcare and immigration and guns, and they probably have a story about some relative who was dying of cancer and then their health insurer basically killed them off. And they probably have some story. I have 2 different stories about how my son nearly ended up being killed in the Isla Vista shooting and then the borderline shooting in Thousand Oaks. They need to hear your stories. They need to hear from you all of the different kinds of stories that you can tell. And it's not just, I always tell that thing about the Woolsey Fire, even though I choke up every single time that I do. I hope you guys didn't mind if I did. But I tell that because that shows to people that this is personal. If you're a wildfire survivor, talk about that. If you're a farmer who can't afford to plant crops because the water got so expensive, talk about that. If you're in clean energy, if you're making money in Teslas or solar, talk about that. They love to hear job creation stories, by the way. They love those more than they love the tragic stories. It's frustrating. It really is. And I share your frustration, but you have to tell them. And this is what I do at the DNC, at my local Dem clubs everywhere, is that climate change is not a can to be kicked down the road to 2050. This is something that is happening right here, right now, to all of us. And it's only going to get worse unless you do something. I mean, I'm sorry for yelling. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm yelling at them, not you.
No, it's just helpful to know that it's not just my experience, that it is something that's legitimate. And I've reached out to the local Democratic Club and I'll say, why don't you put more on your website, or why don't you do more on social media? And they say, oh yeah, we should do that. And then nothing, you know. So I appreciate that. And I know Joe probably has another great question, but I also would like to make people aware of your website and the fact that your website can be used as a tool to kind of evaluate how our candidates and our politicians are doing. Can you take a second just to talk about your website?
Oh, sure. Our website is a little creaky by now, but at this point, it is mostly a list of the politicians that we're endorsing. We generally have a slate of, this year it's 12 people. We've endorsed Mandela Barnes and Sherry Beasley in the Senate, and we even have an ActBlue page called Make Manchin Meaningless. We've endorsed 10 candidates in the House. None of whom are in California. We generally don't endorse incumbents. I endorsed Mike Levin when he first ran, and we ran ads for him and we raised money for him. But this year we don't endorse incumbents. We've got candidates in Oregon, Washington, all across the country, from Pennsylvania and New Mexico and what have you. So they're all up on our website right now. It's climatehawksvote.com. The main thing is to get up on our email list. And we generally try to do a mix of 2 or 3 action items per week, and 1, or since it's election season right now, 3 fundraising emails per week. And I will be honest, we do ask for money both for candidates and for ourselves, because that's how I'm able to keep on doing what I'm doing. I'm not rich, I don't do this for free. I've got a family to support here. And I would appreciate donations. In fact, I should say that right up front. But we do try to get people involved in mostly national level stuff. I do occasionally some California emails. I know I've done a few emails on the rooftop solar situation. And tomorrow we're putting out a petition since the COP27 is coming up. We're putting out a petition calling for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. I'm going to drop another link in the chat that's just sort of like an overview of the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act. No, sorry, wrong one. Keep questions coming, folks, please.
So I'd like to jump onto the benefits of the IRA, since you brought that up. I noted that what you talked about was the 30% tax credit for solar systems, the $7,500 tax credit for EVs, and tax credits for heat pumps. You missed, in my opinion, the single most important benefit, which is that by the end of the decade, we'll have cleaner air and fewer deaths from polluted air. At least that's the hope anyway, or the intention. And you also missed in what to me is a crucial benefit, the 30% tax credit on energy storage technologies to complement solar and wind and so forth. But having said all of that, listen to what I just said and what you said, RL. Tax credit, tax credit, tax credit, rebate. There's some rebates we didn't get specific about. Suppose you are one of the frontline community members that you referenced who doesn't pay taxes, and you live in an apartment complex where you can't get rooftop solar. How does this bill help frontline communities in meaningful ways? And shouldn't we be not following, but leading the charge to get support and get laws passed to benefit the frontline community members who are and who will struggle with and suffer with the climate mess that we've got?
Absolutely, and thanks so much for that. There's going to be an effort to make sure that EV charging that the EV chargers go into lower income communities. I can tell you that in Los Angeles, there is a Tesla charging station in San Fernando. If you know where San Fernando is, well, that's where Nuri Martinez comes out of. Never mind, I don't want to get into Los Angeles politics right now. It's just such a mess. We are making an effort for EV charging stations to go into places, but yeah, you're right. We need to do more, and there is a perception that Teslas are for rich people. It's starting to get a little bit better. The tax credit, there is going to be a tax credit for used vehicles, and the used vehicle has to cost no more than $25,000, which doesn't sound great right now, because my Tesla, I know that Teslas as old as mine might sell for $35,000 used, but the older that this gets, the more people are going to be able to use that particular benefit. One thing that I do is when I talk to candidates who are running at the hyper local level, and I've developed a 10-point plan that I need to do something with after this election. You need to plan for EV chargers in apartment buildings. You need to mandate EV charging be put in at new apartment buildings. Because I talk to too many apartment dwellers who are hesitant to get EVs because there's no place to charge them. Well, they don't charge their F-150 truck at their, or their Toyota Camry at their apartment building. They take that one down to the gas station to charge it. So personally, I don't quite understand this objection, but okay. But yeah, we need to get EV charging into apartment buildings. We need to get them into schools, and we need to get them into those office complexes, places where there are lots and lots of people in office buildings. There should be lots of EV charging stations that people can charge during work. One thing that's starting to come out, by the way, just a little side note for people who already have EVs. The traditional wisdom has been charge at night, but if you're fortunate enough to if you're fortunate enough to be able to charge your car during the day, charge your car during the day, especially if you have solar panels. The reason why is because right now California does have an excess of solar power during the day. It's nighttime that we're worried about. So as EV charging demand grows, we need to do some public education along the lines of, if you're working on your tan, work on your charging your car. Your solar panels should be working too. Something like that, I don't know.
Okay, well, thanks for that, but I gotta say, I'm still terribly disappointed by what is not happening here for the disadvantaged communities. And solar charging is, EV charging is good, but that's just the beginning. I would point out, I put it in the chat, there's an organization called RMI, it used to be called Rocky Mountain Institute. I think their website is rmi.org, and they have a tool called FFORM, FFORM 2021, and it stands for Federal Funding Something Renewables. The R is renewables, and it allows anyone to enter information and get a list of the most cost-effective renewable solutions available and benefits available based upon your particular situation. And I'd like to turn to a related topic. You didn't mention, to me, this is a highlight of the recent legislation, is a law, I think the number, I might be wrong about the number, is AB 2361. And what it is community solar. And it says that there is money available, I think it's $7 billion or some such number, for community solar projects. 51% of the recipients of these projects must be lower income people, and all employees, all people working on installing them have to be paid prevailing wages. And, you know, to me, this community solar program is absolutely extraordinarily important and should be tied closely to some of the other benefits of the federal law. And there's probably money even in the federal law to support some of the financing of community solar projects. To me, these community solar projects could be a tremendous boon for those that live in multi-tenant buildings and can't otherwise get rooftop solar because they don't own a rooftop and so forth. But that brings me to another related question, sort of leading into this, I guess. The question really is, what do we do to get banks, including the Fed, to stop funding climate damaging projects? The single largest funder of climate projects in the world is Chase. And the Fed is also funding a bunch of them. And this is just absolutely insane. What can we do on a federal level? What can we do in the DNC platform and policy to address this?
So you asked you have quite a lot there. And I'm going to briefly mention in response to the bill that you mentioned, it's a great bill. It's a carrot. It's not a mandate. It's a bill where the apartment owner needs to apply for something. So there needs to be some public education and some outreach. And it sounds like you've already gotten a really good handle on what the law is. You just need to educate your landlord about it. So yeah, lots of good smallish bills floating around the state legislature. None of them are massive transformations, but they set up good programs that may end up scaling up. But getting over to the question that you're asking about the Fed, there's both an inside strategy and an outside strategy. The inside strategy is that lots of very smart people are writing very nerdy public comments in response to the SEC rulemaking. That's happening right now. And I say that because I'm on those email chains and I'm not a finance person and my eyes glaze over. And I just say to them, okay, I get it. Tell me how I can turn this into a petition that I can have 10,000 climate hawks sign. The outside game is partly the petitions that I mentioned, and it's partly public shaming, honestly, of some of those banks. Chase is a bad actor, and Chase needs to be shamed and shunned. So don't be shy about switching your accounts over to a credit union. Tell them why you're doing it. If you're familiar with the Stop the Money Pipeline group, they always have activism ideas coming along where you can like stick a calendar note on Jamie Dimon's calendar. You know, time to start defunding from fossils. You know, they always have creative ideas going. Call this hotline to talk to Chase managers. So, like I say, what needs to happen there is both the inside game, public or pressure on the Fed through the rulemaking process at the SEC and the OIRA and all the other alphabet soups of the federal agencies, and separately public naming and shaming, and set up a demonstration in front of your local Chase bank. So do both and keep on doing them if you're already doing them.
Thank you. And please get the DNC to get some sensible policies about these things into the platform. Come on.
I will try. I will be there next time yelling at the top of my lungs.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm doing right now too. You mentioned COP27, you know, and one of the core things that we must do is not just help our own country, but help the world, especially the disadvantaged, you know, South, from ending, you know, by helping them end poverty and by funding and standing up for our commitments, you know, like the $100 million commitment that's been made to fund climate projects in countries. And, you know, this is sort of an issue between countries, I guess, but we should be influencing it at the federal level, I believe. You know, look at Pakistan, a third of it's underwater, and half of it will be underwater in 3 or 6 months. I mean, the country is completely devastated. And, you know, where's the world standing up? You know, where are we standing up? Where's the DNC policy standing up for helping, you know, Pakistan and numerous other countries, you know, that are struggling with climate-related issues, given especially not only that we have money, but we put most of the carbon in the atmosphere. So what's the DNC posture on this, and how do we influence it to get positive support for ending poverty and addressing the climate problems in other countries that we contributed to causing?
So there's two different schools on the COP27, and you know, I began COP15, was that the Copenhagen one? I began that one with all sorts of high hopes and got my hopes pretty well dashed. And over the years, I've decided that I'm with Greta Thunberg. It's all blah, blah, blah. Yeah, loss and damage is going to be a big issue this year. And the plight of Pakistan is really underscoring the need for loss and damage. This one is going to be negotiated by the United States. And this isn't so much a DNC thing as the United States foreign policy. But again, that means public pressure on Joe Biden. If you see a petition come around, sign it. Get loud on Twitter, if you're on Twitter. You know, call into the White House when there's a call-in day. Anything and everything. I don't know what's going to happen with loss and damage this year. I know that in prior years, the United States has sort of shut it down, to be honest. This year, I think it's, I don't think they're going to be able to. I think the Pakistan situation is too dire and it needs help. We need to help. It's just a very uncomfortable pill for the United States to swallow. And you know that the Republicans are going to be all over Joe Biden for conceding, for giving away the United States money to other countries and all that. So I don't know what's going to happen. It's a big mess. I'm not super involved in the COP negotiations. I have friends who are much more involved in international work than I am. I try to pay most of my attention over to US politics and California politics and local politics. And
yeah, but the DNC the DNC is national and doesn't get to focus solely on local politics.
Right.
Anyway, let me just make one more plea for action by the DNC, and that is generically, please take some positions on the science and supporting the science and the transformations needed to clean up and to improve our planetary systems, if you will, the environmental systems. I mean, we've got problems with fresh water. We have problems with chemical and plastic pollutants, you know, with land use and not having enough land, 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 initiatives. Problems with air quality and ozone, particulate pollutants in the air that are killing many people, aerosol loadings in the air, excess fertilizers, potassium and nitrogen and so forth, creating huge dead zone in the ocean, for example, south of New Orleans and others, ocean acidification, biodiversity loss. I mean, you probably saw the article yesterday. Since 1970, we've lost 70% of the wildlife or something like that on the planet. This is absolutely insane. The house is on fire. What I'm trying to say, RL, is the house is on fire, and the DNC isn't doing enough. We don't have strong enough policies. We don't have strong enough action. Can you please, given your position, jump in and support us in doing a whole lot more, a whole lot better, a whole lot faster?
Believe me, I do, and I will, and I appreciate that. The resolution that I wrote, just to give you an idea of the power of the platform, the resolution that I wrote was called in praise of the Inflation Reduction Act and President Biden's climate platform. And I relied on that platform in saying how Democrats take the science seriously, and we know we must do more on the climate crisis. And that's why we must oppose this horrible side deal. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot more work that needs to be done on the platform. I am with you in everybody who gets into climate feels urgency on it. No matter what we're doing, we're not doing enough, and we need to move faster. And there are too many people who think that climate is just another issue. It's just a can to be kicked down the road till 2050. And I'm here to tell them otherwise. And I'm glad to know that I've got you at my back.
Well, more than at your back, we're here. I think the people on this call tonight would collectively be happy to participate in with you in drafting something far more strong than what we've got now, and pushing it to really improve our climate situation. Well, I've kind of editorialized, I think, enough. I'm sorry to have kind of charged in there, but I think we feel passionate about it. We want you to succeed. We want to support this stuff happening.
Yeah, we're definitely behind you, RL. So appreciate all
that behind me, with me.
So yes, and also there's been some discussion in chat. I do want to include some of the other people that are on the call here about lawsuits. I think Gary brought that up. And do you think that that's an effective venue, an effective way to go to get some climate action done?
I sure hope so. I'm really worried about the Supreme Court. I'm really worried about a lawsuit against Exxon or a lawsuit against Shell ending up in front of Amy Coney Barrett, whose dad is lead counsel to Shell. Right. But I personally have been paying attention to attorney general races for the reason that attorney generals are the people who decide to sue states, to sue Exxon. And very generally, and I don't want to speak too much about this because it's a whole different can of worms. There is one lawsuit called Juliana that is children versus the US. They're losing. There's a lot of other lawsuits brought by states and local counties. The city of Imperial Beach, the cities of San Francisco and Oakland, the state of Massachusetts, et cetera, against Exxon, that are really similar to the tobacco lawsuits of the 80s and 90s. And those are winning. Those are winning in large part because they're staying in state court, and Exxon keeps on trying to remove them to federal court because federal court would be more favorable to big corporate defendants, and they keep on losing, and Exxon keeps on losing. Those cases are not very far along. Cases like that move very slowly, but you bet your boots the first time there's $1 billion judgment, everybody's going to sit up and take notice. I hope. I hope that happens. I hope there will be $1 billion. I put a lot of
That's
effort
great.
over the years to yell at Javier Becerra when he was our attorney general to get involved, and he just absolutely would not get off his butt. And I yelled at him in person as well as online a lot.
Well, I'm certainly glad you're on our side. I wouldn't want to be yelled at by you. But anyway, also too, we have some climate reality folks on the line today. And are you familiar with the app called Climate Action Now?
I saw that one mentioned in chat.
Yeah, it's a really great tool. And if you sign up, you can use that as a way to get your petitions and the word out. And I suggest you look into it. I'll send you the link later on. So I think that we have, you've been so generous with your time and everything. And I think that we're probably going to wrap it up now. It's after 7 o'clock, but I do want to thank you so much. And we also thank to our great audience too. I love reading the chat and all the interesting things you guys all have to say. So we have a tradition here, RL, that we like to do something for our speakers who are so generous with their time. And so we have something to present you. Meryl, are you ready? So what we have done for you is we have bought you a tree in your honor. That's, you know, I also had to evacuate the fires stuff. And so these trees are going to be planted in forests that have been decimated by wildfires. So that's really cool because you could go and you could actually look up your specific and find out how it's doing. So anyway, again, thank you to everybody. And don't forget to save the chat. I think there was a lot of valuable information here on this. So don't forget to do that. And I think I'm being outbarked here. So I'm going to say goodbye to all of you. And again, thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.